Welcome to The Independent Artist, sponsored by the National Association of Independent Artists, NAIA. I'm Douglas Sigworth. I'm a glassblower.
I'm Will Armstrong, mixed media artist. Join us as we explore the topics that affect the lives and livelihood of art show artists.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Will, how you doing? It's been another big week here, hasn't it?
It's been another week of sitting for me, Douglas, but doing fine. Hope you are. So, Douglas, while we are recording this kind of preamble for the podcast, we have a lot of friends down in Florida setting up and opening up for the Winter Park Arts Festival. Hopefully they were able to get down there and had enough gas in their cars in order to be able to do it.
That was bizarre. I've worried about breakdowns before, but never thought you wouldn't know where you could get gas for states on end.
Yeah, like having to download an app in order to figure out where the gasoline. Luckily, I am in New Mexico and it's not really been affected. So I've just been sending little care packages of plastic bags full of gasoline to my buddies here across the country. I can't stand seeing these things like people are filling up Tupperware containers and these Rubbermaid bins. It's honestly the most idiotic thing I've ever seen in my life.
I know the panic I had driving across Alligator Alley once, and all of a sudden the gas light comes on, and I was nowhere near a gas station, and that's not a place you want to be breaking down.
No way. That's pretty scary. Everglades, not really known for their gas stations.
And my uncle, had visited my uncle that previous week, just happened to mention, totally unrelated, about the outbreak of the Black Panthers or Black Pumas or something down there, the big cats. And I'm thinking, if I break down and I have to get out of the car, all the wildlife down here, it was a little scary.
Yeah, or the mosquitoes get a serious blood drain.
Oh, yeah.
Excited to see our friends get ready for festivals and things as we're looking at social media, Facebook and Instagram. It's pretty cool to see all the great weather that everybody's been getting.
I'm happy. Winter Park sounds like it's going to be a beautiful weekend down there.
Yeah, low 80s and perfect for Florida. Sounds pretty dreamy, honestly.
That's great. Well, for me, I got another set of bad news. Madison this week is moving to fall.
Are they moving to September?
Yes, they are the same weekend as Plaza.
How, well, that's fucked up. I don't know exactly what to say about that. Well, that's not optimal. People have a pretty packed September as it is. I don't know
where they're pile it on.
Has anybody actually thought about doing a festival just like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, so we can fill up the whole damn month?
Right. Yeah. Just keep it rolling. Well, the other one I got bad news about is Ann Arbor. Haven't done Ann Arbor in years. In 2019, I decided maybe I'll give it a try. Well, somehow I've been, rolled over and rolled over and rolled over. Now it's rolled over to 2022 as well. So my July is now shot.
Are you even making the same work as you were back in 2019 when you juried?
It's hard to say. I can't remember back that far.
Yeah. Who cares? I don't know. Did you notice, though, that when Ann Arbor and Madison moved, like the exact same week, the exact same time, the CDC came out and said that if you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear your mask outdoors. And you don't even really have to wear it indoors. But, of course, you're going to have the a-hole contingent of people that are like, oh, yeah, I'm vaxxed, and just take your mask off and roll through the store. But they're going to do what they're going to do. But I have to be thinking that Ann Arbor is now maybe kicking themselves for canceling right as the CDC says it's okay.
Yeah, well, they said they struggled and toiled over it. I mean, I believe it, but
I'm sure
I think it would have been fine. I mean, I'm 2 weeks out of vaccination, and I'm forgetting my mask every time I go out the house. I'm like, oh my God, and I really don't need it, but it's really for other people's sake that they feel like they're protected if they aren't vaccinated yet.
Right. I have so many dirty masks that my kids have left in the car. I can always grab one if I need one. I'll just huff their own bad breath. I don't want to badmouth Ann Arbor because I do know how big that festival is, and I know how much Mo Riley sweat and really stressed over this whole thing. So
she really did, yeah.
Yeah, she's doing everything she possibly can to get that original going.
The thing that might be pretty challenging here, and I never thought I'd be saying this, but it's the Democratic governor states that are being extra cautious. Yep. And, if you're a Republican governor in Texas and Florida, it's like, we're open. Do what you want.
Well, that's the thing, Douglas. That's how we're working our schedules now. It's like, well, who's more likely to have it going? I'm like, okay, well, Bayou, I feel like I can put in ink. Houston in October.
Yeah.
You look at, Georgia and Atlanta. I'm looking at Park City. I'm like, yeah, Utah, bring it. I'm a liberal guy. I don't want to get into politics on the podcast, but if you know me, I'm a liberal guy, but not when it comes to art shows. Find me a Republican governor and
sign you up. Well, I'm doing my own art fair. I said if I can't get to a show, I'm going to do my own show, and it's going to be in my yard. I've invited...
You're adorable.
I've invited 5 artists. It's Kimber, Bronze Kimber. We're doing Joe Christensen's Big Pots, Michael Bond's etchings. We're going to have an A-list show in my yard. So there, everybody.
Cool.
Yeah.
And why did I not get the application? Are you on Zap, Douglas?
Nope. It was invitational only, but, if you happen to come up to your cabin, you're welcome to, you and Susan are welcome to participate.
Awesome. When is the show going to happen?
Father's Day weekend. We're going to do it during the lakefront slot. Since I lost lakefront, lost a local one here, Edina, and then July fell, so.
Cool. So you're actually doing full booth in the yard?
Yeah, sort of. We're going to do all our sculpture pieces throughout the gardens. Joe and Kimber are going to all my gardens are going to be sculpture gardens. They're not going to do tents. They're just going to circulate their stuff through the yard. And we're going to put a jeweler who has yet to commit, but he's someone everybody knows, and hopefully he gives me the yes today. He's going to set up in our garage, and we're going to be in the other part of the garage, and then we'll have one tent outside. So it's going to be a unique kind of opportunity.
Sounds fun, man. I'm excited about it. You have to let us know how it goes. Hey, who do we have this week? I'm kind of confused. I got this pile of notes here. We have Mickey and Reiko.
Yep. Yes, we do.
It's interesting to hear those guys talk about kind of growing up art show.
Yeah, it was a really nice time for me. Talking with them, it really took me back to a time when I was traveling to shows with little kids. But when I look back at that time in my life, it just seemed very stressful because it's hard enough as it is traveling to shows on your own, loading in and out of hotels and setting up art fair booths. But then you got little kids, and they really need and deserve to be the sole focus. And they get hungry, and they get hot, and they get cranky. And I just felt like I did it all badly.
They do. I feel like a multi-instrumentalist, like somebody who's tried to learn violin and mandolin and guitar and bass and drums, and I haven't learned any of them well. I feel bad at it. So I've always been kind of a guy that's left the kids at home, and I go out and do the show, or my ex goes out and does the show while I stay home. And it's just... They're getting a little bit older, and that may change, but it's just an open dialogue. So I hear what they're going through, and it's interesting to see Reiko come out on the other side of it and be so good at it and so successful and so well balanced too.
Well, and I think it also was a point of reflection for me because I shared these memories with my kids after this interview. And we had this kind of nostalgic time because my kids are 20 and 23 now, and they haven't been on the road with me since they were probably middle schoolers. And, my daughter was like, oh, I remember the time that I got in trouble and I had to come to the show with you. It was because it was a punishment, and we'd laugh about it. And I'm thinking, you hated me that whole weekend.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? Like, they get so mad at you. Like, I was just talking about going for hikes with my kids, and they just get so hot and uncomfortable, and their legs hurt, and their feet hurt, and they're blah. And they're just bitching and moaning the entire time, and they get to the end of the hike. I'm like, God, I want to throw you off the mountain. And then the next weekend, we're like, hey, can we go back to that place where we hiked last weekend? That was super fun. I'm like, super fun? Then why are you busting me the entire time on it? So I get it. Well, think about how many different shows that you and I have gone to that if you take us in the middle of the rainstorm, in the middle of this, in the middle of what's going on and how hot it is, I'm looking back on some of these festivals that I've done with 510 heat index.
Oh.
And I still have some fond memories of those shows.
Yeah.
I remember opening up my booth to a really hot, steamy morning in Ann Arbor, and I open it up and I look across the street, and they're two of my favorite people in the world opening up their tents. And I'm like, they're my war buddies. We're gonna do this.
We're in this together, yeah.
Absolutely. So I can see how your kids can see that too, have that. They are good memories. We're cultivating some good things.
My daughter actually almost got kidnapped at a show when she was 8 or 9 years old.
That's my worst nightmare.
So I've got this Looney Tune in my booth at the end of a Sunday show, and she's talking my ear off, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm actually going to sell this $250 piece, even though in the back of my mind I'm thinking, I just want to wrap things up and get the heck out of here. But anyway, so make the sale, wrapping it up. And as I'm wrapping it up, the lady grabs my daughter's hand and says, hey, let's go across the street. There's literally a candy store across the street. She says, hey, let's go across the street and I'm going to get you some candy. I'm thinking, you're not going to take my daughter. So I say, oh, no. And then on a dime, her really nice personality changes really mean, and she gets in my face and she says, what is the matter with you? What is your fucking problem?
Oh, my God.
And
are you kidding me?
She did. And I go, oh, no, it's okay. I mean, I should have just said, get out of here. But I said, oh, no, it's okay. I just want to go with you guys. You know what I mean? So I finish wrapping it up. I take her charge card. We now are leaving the booth while everyone's tearing down. Walk across the street, get the fucking candy. She's saying my daughter needs to walk her to the car. So then this is all done with. We're packing up. We're leaving. I don't want to scare my daughter at this point. We're sitting in the hotel room afterwards, and I'm telling her, this was a way that this woman was grooming us to see if she could get you away from me. And my daughter was like, I literally almost fell for the oldest trick in the book. I almost went with somebody because they wanted to buy me candy.
That's horrifying. So you dealt with it the polite way, and that's the way that we're in our public light, and we're trying to be nice, and we're trying to make sales, and we're trying not to ruin things. And it's kind of we're conditioned to be deferential to the people that come into the booth.
Right. We want to be pleasers. We're trying to make a living, for crying out loud.
My friend Deb Adelson Novak had a stalker at her booth. And this guy kept coming around, and he kept coming around. And she's a good friend of mine, and she was a couple blocks away, and we had heard through different text threads that there was this problem. And, she asked one person to kind of come in and try to help her out. And he came over, and he's, being polite and kind of, hey, what's going on, hemming and hawing. Meanwhile, Matthew Hatala, one of the nicest guys I know, but at the same time, he's got a very nice resting asshole face.
Yeah.
And he comes in. Matthew
like
Hatala.
No means no with Matthew.
Oh, my God. So Matthew Hatala comes in from absolutely nowhere and just gets right in this guy's face. He goes, get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out. And the guy just takes off running. He's like, go on, run. Don't come back. And it was like, and Deb just kind of melted. You're like, oh, you're my hero. It just was perfect. So no hemming and hawing, no $250 sale, no candy at the candy store next time.
Get the here!
Yeah, I'm going to call Matthew Hatala and get him to come over to your booth. Get the fuck out of here. If Matthew Hatala is yelling at you like that, you're going to get the fuck out of there.
That's right. Either that or he's going to organize a pizza and bowling for all the exhibitors.
How sweet is that guy?
I know.
I just, you're talking about the lakefront thing, and it's like, what a family atmosphere when you get everything going. And Matthew buys, we don't have time to get away for dinner, and they don't invite us to the hoity-toity food and wine party. So Matthew orders a stack of pizzas. Come down and have a piece. He's just the sweetest guy.
Yeah, totally.
He's a nice balance between kind of scary and huge teddy bear. So gotta love Matt. He's definitely part of he's a huge part of our tribe.
That's right.
Hey, let's jump out of that Matt thing and right into the interview, Douglas. You did such a great job. I can't wait for everybody to hear it.
All right. Well, thanks. And here it is. Welcome to the podcast, Mickey Cunningham and her daughter, Reiko Uchytil. Steve and Mickey Cunningham were true partners in every sense of the word. This married couple formed a partnership in creating their artistic and functional pottery business starting back in 1980. They were both integral in the hands-on creation and selling of their work. In addition to a successful and thriving career, they were also the parents of Reiko and Luke. Juggling an artist lifestyle while raising children is a unique experience for sure. Reiko has grown into adulthood and created her own career as an artist inspired by her parents' example. You can see Reiko's work on her website at helloimreiko.com. That's Reiko. Mickey and Reiko, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
In preparation for this episode, I spoke with you both last week, and we have so many experiences in common. My wife Renee and I work in a glass partnership as roadshow artists and raised 2 children along the way, just like you, Mickey. Looking back on your experiences, can you describe some of the highlights of raising your children in this art fair business?
So probably the highlights is being parents, being able to be home when our kids got home from school, to be able to work at home, making all our decisions, just independent, being self-employed. It was a great way to make a living and, to be creative as well and raise our 2 kids.
Were there any challenges with raising your children on the road?
So many challenges. It was a lot of organizing. It's challenging itself just getting to the art show with your inventory and be ready. And on top of that, having your kids, it was kind of like a moving day. I mean, you took your favorite blankets and toys and books and, it was a big load, just to get their stuff together on top of what we had to do for the show.
But we were never bored and we were wanting for nothing. So it was a good experience.
I know for us, we would get the whole van packed with glass and the tent and everything. And then it could take a whole, another 6 hours just to get the family packed in the car. It was a whole additional component.
Yeah, I always call it the moving day because that's how I felt like sometimes, didn't it?
Yeah. What did you plan on the trips to keep the kids engaged and entertained?
Well, we're going way back. We did have one of those old little TVs that you could put the VHS movies in.
Yes.
That, it was strapped with a bungee cord in the middle between the 2 seats. And so they picked their favorite movies, books, games. And then we also listened, books on tape like Harry Potter.
Oh.
That took us long ways, which was great. Luke, my son, I don't know how old he was at the time, but he wanted to continue driving so he could keep listening to the rest of the story. So his train of thought was really good when it came to listening to the stories. So that bought a lot of time.
Reiko, what do you remember about those long trips in the van?
My brother and I always relied heavily on each other for companionship and friendship. So we would always entertain each other with games and then the movies. I think we know every Disney movie by heart.
Yeah. There wasn't ever any bickering, the long car rides or anything?
I don't recall fighting all that much in the car. We are siblings, so there were squabbles.
And it's certainly close quarters.
Yep.
Was nice being able to have the bench in the van so we could spread out a little bit and also sleep.
Okay. Did you pack them in pretty tight there, Mickey? Everything all around and every spare space was taken?
Yeah, it depends on the shows. Especially when we were traveling to Pensacola to do a show. We were packed in like sardines and everything. So.
Well, when you bring up Pensacola, did you pick some of the trips that turned into vacations too? You'd stay a little bit longer and have some fun?
Yes, absolutely. Pensacola was our more fun place that we used to go, take the kids every other years. The 4 of us would go. Steve would set up. I'd get to spend the day on the beach with the kids. And then we would all go to the show. And it seems like a lot of the shows were kind of kids friendly too. There were some activities always going on, so that kept them busy.
Uh-huh.
A lot of the live performance also helped. And also the kids, they knew other fellow artists.
Mm.
So, they did go around and kind of entertain themselves by visiting with the other artists.
Well, they didn't have Find a Friend apps on their phones back then, so how did you keep track of them?
Well, good old Radio Shack, we had walkie-talkies and babysitters. I know I went through a couple sets of walkie-talkies, but it was helpful, to just be able to communicate where they are, and also gave them a little bit of freedom too, to roam kind of in the vicinity of our booth.
Yeah. Reiko, who were some of the other roadshow kids that you guys connected with?
So we got to connect with quite a few different sibling groups, like Mikyung, Lee, her kids, Christy and Alexander, because they were roughly our age. And Mom, you'll have to help me with the name for Brian and Lindsay's.
Joe and Hal Berger, the glass people, and they were also the same age.
And I know Brian's a glass blower now too. He's a second generation.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Mickey, I know you've talked about sometimes just by the nature of needing to make a living that you guys would split and do different shows, and then maybe, either the kids would stay home with one of you if one of you stayed home, or you'd split one kid with the other. Can you tell me a little bit about the challenges of managing multiple shows?
Yeah, it was challenging, having 2 vans and 2 inventories. And then also to make sure all the kids are at the right place for their activities and their needs. Get the groceries shopped, food made, the laundries. If I was on the road, I often left 3-page lists for Steve to go over to take care of the kids. When he left, it wasn't that complicated because I kind of knew the routine way better than Steve did.
So you had the extra added responsibility of managing work and family.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
She had to run both the family and still work.
Okay.
But it wasn't perfect, but it worked.
Yeah. Well, Reiko, looking back on it, did it seem like your mom was like overworked and stressed, or did she kind of seem like she just handled it all in stride? How did it seem?
So since they were home all the time, it didn't seem from our point of view like, oh yeah, Mom's home. So, she's just there. And, we knew that they were working really hard, but as young kids, it was just kind of like.
Yeah.
I was like a stay-home mom to them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's what they thought.
Worked 60 hours a week.
Right. Our kids' experience was Mom and Dad are always, when they're not like taking care of us, they're out in the studio working. It would even be like holidays, we might have a holiday meal, but then we'd get a few hours in the studio afterwards.
Yes.
Holidays are just another day.
So, studio, yeah, definitely. We were out in our studio, I think, more than our house. There's a lot of convenience having a studio at home.
Yeah.
But a lot of disadvantage because, the work's always there. But you know what? We loved our studio. It was like a huge mudroom.
Oh, yeah.
It was a play area for the kids and our dogs. And when their friends came, again, it was just a fun studio to have. I know it was a lot of work, but at the same time, there was a lot of fun out of it.
Well, it's like a lifestyle you create for yourself. It's a non-traditional lifestyle, but it's like your work is all, it's intertwined into the raising of the kids. It's all tied in together.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, there really wasn't much separation. You kind of had the freedom to make your own schedule and work when you want to. So you did have that advantage, especially when you had to attend like your kids' sports events or other activities or dance performance. It helped having your own schedule.
Reiko, did you ever feel like your mom and dad were too busy to take a break, or did you feel like they were accessible to you all the time?
Luke and I never felt ignored in any way. We did understand, that because they had weekend shows that there were some activities they were going to miss, but we always felt supported.
Yeah. As they got older, when we were gone on the weekend, was a little more challenging as they were in high school.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about that.
Whatever could you mean by that?
There were some parties. We lived out in the country on 10 acres. It was pretty private. So you could kind of get away with a lot of things.
Okay.
And
especially a high school party.
Yes. And Reiko, she had a lot of fun in high school.
Okay. If you found out that she had a big party, did she end up having to do something to make up for it?
I had to paint the whole house.
And she got grounded like maybe a month at a time.
Okay.
But
Yep.
One time my daughter got a little mouthy with just putting the dishes away. And so that weekend, her penance was she had to come to the art show with me. So she got to be under my wing for the weekend.
I think you had to miss homecoming dance for that.
Oh,
and
that's
had to go
being
to the
serious.
Yes, yep. So they had a lot of freedom, but we had rules.
Yeah. But we also got to bring our friends with us sometimes. So that was fun.
Cool.
And our friends have fond memories of that as well.
Were there any special trips? Like, were those planned because you were going to go somewhere that you could tie in a vacation or a trip to? Or was it just to do the show?
That was just to do the shows. And when we took, extra friends, it was always, we tried to make sure the hotel's like within a few blocks of the art show.
Okay.
That way they could go back and forth, have a little freedom. And just the convenience, not have to drive for the weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you pick shows specifically because they would be family friendly, or did you pick your shows basically on the bottom line?
I think we chose to be profitable and successful because, doing our show is so much work. I mean, just planning, getting there and everything. Once we got accepted to a particular shows, if it worked out, then we would definitely plan, if we could make it into a vacation or, just spend a few extra days is how it went.
Yeah, because I mean, it's a totally different setting if you're doing a show in downtown Chicago, for example, than if you're at like Economo Walk in their park setting. It's so that would be such an easier setting for having a family and kids around.
Exactly, yeah. And as they got older, it was harder to take the kids out of school. So I think at that point, often one of us was always at home, and also continue to build up inventory and. So for many years, we ended up kind of, just traveling individually and the other just maintaining at home with the kids.
Reiko, when you got older and you would help out at the show, like what sorts of things would you do?
I really enjoyed when Mom would pick me up, and I enjoyed the physical setting up at the show and getting to go see different towns because I would just tell her, pay me in food and drink kind of thing because I was getting really into different restaurants and cooking and all of that. So that was incredibly exciting. And some like favorite places were like Madison.
Okay.
With the access to Rome and go to the campus and the shopping and the great food scene.
Yeah.
But now as an adult artist, I don't like to participate in that show.
You see it from a whole different point of view now.
Mm-hmm. It was great just being a helper.
Yeah. What about with the selling? Would you get involved in like I know my kids, the collectors will look at the work and then they'll turn to their little kid and they'll say, well, which one do you think I should buy? Did you ever have that happen to you?
Oh, most certainly. We were encouraged at a young age to participate and create art. So not only with listening to our parents, talk about their work, we got to talk about our work as well, and then continue to help sell Mom and Dad's pieces. Okay.
I know when we talked last week, you said you could hear the company line, so to speak, or the phrases that they would use, and so you kind of would adopt the similar verbiage.
Yes. The lifestyle of being an on-the-road art fair kid has equipped my brother and I with many, many usable life skills.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't trade that upbringing for anything.
Was it coolers of food or was it Big Mac and fries for your family on the road?
For the most part, Mom was excellent at planning different foods and meals. She's always been very conscious of our nutrition and what goes into our bodies. And she wants to make sure that, we could always eat and enjoy. So there was always a big cooler full of food. And, on the occasion when you had to, there was the fast food stops. We didn't grow up with eating fast food all that often, so it's not really anything we ever wanted.
Yeah. I mean, it's exponentially more effort when you have kids to prepare in that regard. You got to have all the foods the kids like. when you're two people travel into an art show, you pop into a restaurant, you can keep it the budget can stay kind of small, but you start adding 4 people to the mix and your food budget goes way through the roof.
Yes, it does. And Mom's love of cooking and preparing meals for all these years, for the fun of it, she attended culinary school.
Oh, she did?
While still working full time.
I was able to do that because the kids were in high school at that point.
Okay.
And it's always been my dream to go to culinary school. And it was the most fun I've had, going to school for 2 years. Eating together, food was really important part of our family. We've had more fun conversations around the dinner table, kids growing up. And Steve grew up really poor and he was devious and just mischief. And, he often shared his childhood stories. So,
that's fun.
Yeah.
You guys were a very open family. You like to communicate and tell stories.
Absolutely.
We really loved and relied on each other.
I do find that having our art business and our family life all kind of intertwined, we all spend so much more time together, and you have a tighter family, a tighter bond. Mm-hmm. This kind of lifestyle really creates a strong family unit.
Mm-hmm. Definitely has for us, yes.
Reiko, how would you describe your mom's parenting style throughout your lifetime?
Unconditional love.
Oh.
And spastic.
And spastic.
Because she had to do everything and she did everything and she would she never half-assed anything. Oh. She gave it her all. And so,
So high standards, high integrity.
Yes. She was, working all day and we would still get to come home and there would be chocolate chip cookies with a note on the counter for us. She did it all. And she still runs circles around me.
Mickey, didn't you ever get tired? Weren't you just exhausted or what? What was it like for you at the end of the day?
Well, I slept good every night. Yeah. You just have a glass of wine and get a good night's sleep and you start over again next day. Parenting just doesn't end. And being self-employed doesn't end. You have to continue to create and, get your inventory for your next show. We just had that crazy pace for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Reiko, how would you describe you and your brother's behavior? Were you guys real calm kind of kids or?
We were definitely high energy children.
Yeah.
We were from a young age involved in sports, but then also growing out in the country. We got to run around on all 10 acres and swim in the pond and go on adventures in the woods. So we lived a very active lifestyle.
That's fun. I remember some story about how your poor mother couldn't keep the two of you contained in your seatbelts in the back seat. Do you want to tell us a little more about that?
With our level of activity, we obviously didn't probably have a movie in at the time and we're done playing our card games. So we decided that we wanted to climb all over Mom's display and boxes in the van, therefore leading to her getting pulled over.
They were fairly young. They were about 2 and 5 at the time.
Okay.
And I just did the St. Louis show, which was the first year. And coming back, the van was empty because it's the only show I've ever sold out.
Congratulations. That's a good
Thank
feeling,
you.
Isn't it?
But that show itself, the first year, and I had babysitters lined up. And on Sunday, I had a no-show the sitter. And so it was, I was in frantic, what I do with a 2 and a 5-year-old all day at the show. But luckily, there was another fellow artist who lived in St. Louis who helped me locate a babysitter. And again, back then, no cell phone,
right.
No way to communicate. I just hand over my 2 kids to this high school girl to take care of my kids for the day.
Yeah.
And I was a wreck for the day.
Absolutely. If your childcare falls through for a show like St. Louis, that could be a couple months worth of income. You're like, I've just got to figure this out. I've got to
Exactly.
I've got to find childcare now.
So yes, everything worked out. We made it through and I got my kids back and we drove home and this was one drama after that. that whole weekend, and I was glad when it was over. That was a tough weekend. Yeah.
Oh, Mickey, can you talk about the added pressure there is for a collaborating artist couple to support themselves as opposed to when, say, one of the spouses has a salaried type job?
Yes. We relied on galleries and commissions and, of course, the art shows. With the pressure, we always felt like we had to apply to multiple shows on the same weekend to kind of secure to make sure we got into at least one show.
Yeah. I can totally relate to that. It's like you feel like you just need to pack yourself full of opportunities so that you are covered. Your bases are always covered.
Exactly. You end up having to cancel some of the shows because, you applied multiple times. But it was a great pressure. It was the sole income of strictly relying on being on the road. And, you never know the weather. Just made a challenge, from year to year because you kind of had to start all over each year applying for new shows. Nothing was ever guaranteed unless you received a reward, which was very few for us. Yeah.
Well, when you feel like you don't have that kind of that safety net or that backup plan, do you feel like it really pushes you in kind of a different way to work harder and to always be like really, really industrious when it comes to your creation?
Yes. We did focus a lot on sellable items, functional, utilitarian, and, price point made a big difference as well. Steve and I always feel at the art show, we wanted to be able to have, anybody that came by to be able to afford our work. And that really made a difference on our income because we were able to sell the lower end items on impulse buy as people were just, coming to the art show for a day to just spend out there. And, it was a lot of impulse buy really made a big difference.
And also, you guys, every about decade, changed the entire look of your body of work to adapt and change with the times.
Cool.
So you guys were great chameleons in being able to do that and be successful.
Right. And to appeal to a new market, but then also expand your current customer base by offering new things.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that was a struggle in itself because you really need time to create and, develop your new glazes to work into your new body of work. We never had quite that time, but you had to work that in between, your schedule of doing shows, traveling, raising your kids. You just had to make it work.
Yeah. Reiko, do you feel like you do things a little bit differently? Your situation, you and your husband aren't both roadshow artists. So do you feel like you have a little bit more freedom to create and be a little more experimental in what you do?
Very much so. Even in the very beginning, because I was fortunate to utilize mom and dad's studio, I had everything right there on a silver platter. And so I took my silver spoon and ate.
Like a lot of us in this kind of like the fine craft business, the studio startup costs are huge and often prohibitive for people to get started in it. And so you were able to just kind of like step into that with a working studio that you could start making work that really inspired you.
Yes. I did not have to create my own studio space until mom retired and I was forced to make my house work.
Did you inherit any of the equipment or anything like that, or was it all from scratch?
Mom was very generous and she let me pick out any of the tools and equipment that I wanted to utilize. And I produce on a much, much smaller volume than what her and dad did. I've always had the opportunity to play and create, and because I didn't have to build that studio right offhand. And I had, my mother and father there to help kind of guide me and answer questions. If I was kind of stuck and struggling, I could just stop and go walk around the house and look at art. And
yeah, you didn't have the pressure of thinking, I'm going to need to make something that is marketable and sell because I've got studio expenses, I've got a mortgage that my art business has to fund. That does kind of take the pressure off of that.
Yes.
I still thought about those things because, I knew eventually that I would have to stand on my own 2 feet, and I had to create items that were sellable, but also things that I liked. And my folks set up a really good model for that.
Cool. Now, you entered the art show market after the big recession, after the big crash that happened in like 2008 or so.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yes. I started at the Des Moines Arts Festival as emerging artist in 2012.
Well, okay. So, Mickey, all your years on the road, did you see kind of a shift in what your peers were doing in regards to what you described about having impulse buy items that were more on a lower price point, but then that crash happened, and I know a lot of our art fair friends decided, well, I'm going to go big or go home, and I'm going to start appealing to that upper echelon. Did you see that shift too?
For us, our crash kind of started 2006.
Okay.
Our particular design of that period kind of ended, and we just were not selling. So at 2006, we had to start rethinking and what our next design was going to be, and what we were going to add new pieces to create. So we were kind of already in the recession.
When you looked around you, were there fewer folks who really kind of shot for the higher end buyer who was looking for the 1,000 and up kind of pieces of art? Because to me, it seemed like at that point, a lot of artists made that shift.
Yeah. I'm looking back, and there definitely were artists with bigger ticket items.
Mm-hmm.
And, we still have never done that. But fortunately, we created an item that worked for us in 2008 that really helped us through that recession. But we eventually worked up into a higher price item, which really, it made a difference in every show when we sold those bigger items.
Yeah, it certainly changes your opportunity. Like, I feel like when we're at a show in the olden days, when we first started out and kind of had this idea that, well, we've got to have plenty of $100 items for people, that if you're not selling right off the bat that kind of volume, you realize on a Sunday you're not going to get there unless you offer maybe $2,000 pieces, and that can just like really turn around your show.
Yeah, it really does make a difference. And eventually us creating those larger pieces did make a difference on our income or at the end of the weekend of the shows.
Reiko, the way of watching your parents work, did that kind of influence like that shift? Your work is more sculptural in nature, and you kind of like just do away with the whole idea of function.
Yes. So I don't consider myself a traditional potter. Clay is my medium that I like to utilize, but I also like to bring a little bit of some found object into there because I like to, always experiment in other mediums. Because I'm not a very traditional potter, I don't sit there and make 50 of one item all at a time. When
we make that shift and we start appealing to the higher end folks, it kind of changes the ball game of how we're able to support ourselves, and it changes that rush around the world that I think Mickey and I am very familiar with, that feeling of just kind of like always on this hamster wheel of getting to the next show. And if you have the higher end work, you might have some zeros. I mean, I think you've got yourself well protected with a range. But the folks who do work on the really high end, they go to get some zeros, but then they go and get some knock them out of the park kind of shows.
Yeah, and that is a really intimidating switch over, especially when you're so used to having your kind of bread and butter items, your nickel and dime, and you kind of keep busy with your little sales here and there. And I mean, my prices range from $30 up to $2,000, and it's really hard to get out of that and take the step to those big ticket items.
In the way our medium works, we sell something, whether it's $100 or $1,000, we have to go back to the studio and we have to get back to work to replace that item. We can't have something that is, say, like a reproduction type item where we can phone it up and say, I need 20 more of this and be ready for the next show. We have to actually put in the work to...
Right. Even if you need like 20 mugs, it's like you still have to go home and make those 20 cups.
Right. And that $20 mug sometimes takes as long as making a higher end piece. And so that can really just be so rough.
Yeah. I think that's also too with my few functional items. I like to say that they're visually functional too, which is why I can ask a little bit more for them because I do put more time into them.
As a glass artist and starting out and kind of finding our way, we made functional vases. I would say we've changed our approach because we're not really looking at them being flower vases. So by rebranding them as a vessel, that really makes it seem like it's its own thing, meant to be admired for its shape, and it just because it has an opening at the top doesn't mean we have to stick something in it.
Right.
Mickey, can you talk a little bit about your partnership with Steve? Anything you'd like to share about you guys as a working couple?
Well, we literally handled every piece between the two of us, probably 4 or 5 times. By the time whether I was making a piece or Steve was making a piece, I would decorate on a piece that he would make, vice versa on my piece. So really, we overlapped creating every piece together one way or another, which is really unusual.
Did you guys do similar tasks, or was it like, well, this is my aspect of each piece and this is his aspect of each piece?
Right. Well, Steve did mostly throwing on the wheel. I did the slab work on a slab roller. And then we also collaborated. So he would throw some things and I would do slab, and we would combine the pieces together. Mm-hmm. But then when it came to decorating the surface, we really worked on it together. I would do the first stage, and then he would come in and kind of fill in the details. And, it worked for us, which is really unusual. But that's kind of how we did with all our pieces.
Mm-hmm. When Renee and I started glass blowing, as students, we were trying to develop what our partnership would be. And when we were in school, our instructor wanted us to be individual artists before we decided to work as partners, which was a really important task for us. So we've both worked start to finish on our own bodies of work. But the problem with that was our bodies of work were so different. And when we decided to collaborate, we divided up, like we're in the blowing process together from start to finish. I'd start the piece and do the layering, she finishes and shapes, but we're assisting throughout the process. And then it developed a kind of body of work that was like from a third entity, being the partnership. And so I get what you're saying about this kind of both being actively involved in each piece. And you do kind of like have to, when you hand it off to the other person, you give over your part of it so that they can put their mark on it. And then it comes back to you, and then you get to put your mark. You know what I mean? It's like a building process.
I think we just went back and forth on what needed to be done.
Yeah, you did great handing pieces off back and forth.
Yeah.
And you just had total trust in each other, and you knew the directions you were going to go. And if you didn't, you guys kind of worked it out and figured out what would work best. And there was always trial and error, and you always had an end result at some point.
The nature of your medium lends itself to time to step back and kind of evaluate. With glass blowing, it's hot and it's changing on a moment-by-moment basis. And so we can't just stop in the middle of blowing the piece up, for example, and say, hey, what do you think? Should I make it bigger or smaller? It is because it's ever changing. So we had to have real definite rules of this is your part, you're in charge, you got to go with the instinctual thing all by yourself. And then I can't tell you and you can't tell me. It's got to be like this autonomous kind of moment in time.
Right.
Wow.
I watched your video, and I definitely understand that because it is constantly moving.
Yeah. We're working blind in a way because we can't see the color. And I know that's probably like it is for you guys when you're applying your glazes. You really don't, you have experience as to how it's worked out in the past, but each time you fire something, it's going to, you open it up the kiln and you're like, ooh, it's like Christmas. And sometimes it's not like Christmas. Sometimes it's not good.
Right. Exactly. And we've had those moments of not being Christmas.
Sometimes it looks like a war zone.
Yeah.
And isn't it awful when you are thinking, I nailed it, this is going to be our showcase piece, and then you open it up the kiln the next day and you're like, I missed the mark.
Yes. Yep. There has been some disappointment, and also like large pieces that we work on, by the time you're done firing and then, there's a crack in it when the final glazing, and, there's not a thing you could do. It's done, and you just have to take a hammer to it, and that's it.
Oh, that whole aspect of pottery or glass breaking and having a new life or going in the garbage, that really freaks some people out. I mean, they're like, you can't do that. You can't get rid of it.
It's amazing what it puts you through emotionally, that you really learn to let go of things.
I agree. Because you invest your energy and your time into this piece. And then, you get to a point and it breaks or it falls off the pipe, or like you said, it comes out of the kiln and it cracks on you for whatever reason. And you're like, oh, well, I guess I'll make another one, or it wasn't meant to be.
Yeah. It still hurts, but then you go, well, I have more raw material.
Yeah. I wonder if that's kind of a lesson for life, too, that we can really kind of roll with the punches a bit.
Oh, yeah. It definitely works into your life. If you could let go, you can move on forward, Yeah.
So, Mickey, you credit your husband for the life that you've enjoyed. We've had many talks about just how you feel so grateful for his influence in your life and for what he's created. But from my experience with you and my interaction with you, I'm equally impressed with, your industriousness as well. I mean, Reiko talks about how you weren't just working in your art business and going off and selling. You had the whole responsibility of running the household and raising the children.
Yeah. I attribute a lot to Steve because it was his creativity, which is the beginning of the business. I mean, if you don't have that creativity and idea, where do you start?
So he was the spark. He was the influence.
Yeah. He had a lot more of that than I did. Even though, I worked very hard with come to production and different things, but the idea had to come first. So, that's where I'm coming from.
Oh, that's cool. Mickey, where were you born?
I was born in Seoul, Korea. I lived in an orphanage until I was adopted at age of 8.
Wow. Tell me more about that.
I guess I was out in the street when I was 2 years old. They didn't know what to do, so they placed me in a temporary shelter and nobody claimed me. So then I went to a Catholic orphanage and lived there until I was adopted to an American family.
Okay.
And when I arrived here, I did not speak the language, but I did love to draw and work with my hands. So my parents did put me at the art center to take classes. And I remember making my first clay pig. And then we had an option to make kind of an abstract clay piece with a mixed media. I did this kind of a volcano shape with the wires coming out,
Yeah.
So that was my first experience of having an art class.
You came into this world at a young life. It sounds like a pretty traumatic experience. And then for your parents to see that you, like that art was like your way through that. And then it ended up becoming your life, ultimately.
Yes. I didn't know it was going to happen that way, but...
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
We kind of find our way. That's kind of how our lives are directed in such an interesting, how we all have these twists and turns and sent us on a different path.
Well, I always took art classes, junior high and high school, and that's actually where I met Steve. He was my pottery teacher.
Oh, cool.
I have to say he did not give me an A for a grade. I got a B.
That's right. He had to be extra hard on you, right?
Can't play favorites.
I think he gave out 1 A, and that was to my friend. She was pretty cute. She's the only person that I know that got an A, and I still question, like, why did you get an A and I got a B? But that's okay. I'm the one who married him.
Well, you've made your living out on the road, setting up your work and interacting with collectors. Did you ever experience any personal struggles with interacting with the public, either with your race or with your gender?
In the early years, I was really young, 22. I found that people didn't really take me very seriously at the shows. I remember experiencing that. I never quite felt the respect. I was young. Obviously, I must need to earn it. So I did come across that. Being an Asian, I had a lot of comments, things like, is this made in China, or just maybe to spark a conversation, or they just want to say something. Those things really never bothered me. I just kind of let it go. So whether it was prejudice on their intention, or I didn't make a big deal out of it.
Or ignorance.
Yeah.
And do you think it's that you wanted to just not have confrontation on that area and just kind of let it move on and just not let it affect you?
I am not a confrontation person, and being an orphan, I got teased a lot. So from early age, so when people made remarks or whatever, I just kind of let it go. It just didn't matter.
Yeah. Okay. Did you have any challenges in the past year with the pandemic and the comments about the China virus?
I did not have any kind of personal attack on me, but myself, the challenges were, I feel more vulnerable out there. I had more fear. I guess, I've never experienced that fear of the prejudice being Asian, but I did last year. I was in Florida and I was trying to get back to Iowa. It took me probably 2 weeks to contemplate like how am I going to travel, stopping to get gas, hotels. I had to really think about all that for the first time in my life. And it was really uncomfortable, upsetting. And I think, even still our whole family, Reiko being half Korean, and we've had kind of this discussion. And I think we are all just a little bit more careful of our surroundings.
I've always admired Reiko. The perception I have of you is that you're kind of fearless. I mean, I was setting up a show and it was late and I was getting ready to wrap things up, and I observed you just getting to the show and setting up at 10 or 11 o'clock at night. You're by yourself, and part of me was like, should I offer to stay and help her? But you seem like you were good and you had it all under control. Can you talk a little bit about the vulnerabilities of traveling as a woman?
Yeah, so definitely have always had safety on the mind. If I start to get drowsy while driving, I really have to pay attention to where I want to stop and nap. And, and if I do nap in my van, like, can somebody see me? And I just, I try not to put myself in a vulnerable spot. I do carry protection as far as, the little kitty cat keychain thing. And I have a couple knives in my van.
Yeah. You feel like you have a way to defend yourself. Because, you can't just, naively walk into things. You have to have a plan.
Right. And before I ever open my door, if it's late at night, I look around and see what other vehicles are there. So that way I'm not caught off guard. I always have to be the proactive one. At least at shows, it's such a comfortable setting because that's what I've been doing my whole life, whether helping mom and dad at a show with their work and then, continuing with my work. It's so familiar that I feel fairly safe.
You've grown up with watching your mom go off and do shows on her own and, bring you and Luke. So, I mean, maybe it just was that example never even made you think that it's anything to even have a red flag about.
Right. And, all of us develop such a relationship that, the other artists become family and always talking to see who's going to be at the show and, who's camping, who's staying where. So there's always some kind of outreach that, if something happens, I've got someone to go to. So that's always very comforting.
Yeah, Mickey, you mentioned that to me in one of our conversations, is that you always felt like when you arrived at a show that you had the community, you had eyes on you, you had eyes on your kids. So, you could have them wander off with walkie-talkies and feel like, well, I've got so-and-so 10 booths down who knows my kids. And if somebody gives them a hard time, they'll jump in.
So that was a good comforting knowing that, if there was anything ever happen, I knew my fellow artists would protect my kids.
Or keep us in line going, shouldn't you be in your parents' booth?
They could feel like they had a personal relationship with you and your kids and talk to you almost like they're an aunt and uncle or something.
Mm-hmm. But, I've had where, my display's been completely destroyed because of the nature of the weather. And, people like Sharon Fujimoto, her husband, Joe, he spent like 2 hours helping me duct tape my canopy or panels so I could be back working and selling. Just like that example. Or when Steve was sick, I don't mean to just bring up glass workers, but like Toby McGee, he calls us, I'll fly down and, help drive the van back to Des Moines.
He's a great guy.
Things like that. Yeah. When Steve passed away, I got a lot of flowers and cards and stuff. But one day I went to the mailbox and there were literally 50 cards in my mailbox. And majority was that from fellow artists.
Yeah. Wow.
They really helped me get through, with their kind words and encouragement. So
that's awesome. Okay, so Reiko, from where I'm sitting, you have a really unique perspective. You grew up as a youngster on the road, watching how your parents have done things for 30 or so years. And you're just stepping now into your career. And how do you see this art fair market? It's changed a lot, but how do you see, are there big shifts in your mind as to you moving forward in this market than to how your parents were in the market?
Very much so. I feel you are less dependent on the in-person interactions at the art shows, and that you really do need to have an online presence. It was really important to me to get my website up and running, so then that way, people could easily click and find me. Mm-hmm. There's just so much online interactions, and especially with the pandemic going on, it helped me get through that year.
Yeah.
I don't do as many shows as my folks because, one, I can't produce that much work, but also it's hard. It's a lot of work. And so it is a little bit easier to just take pictures and sell from online. And it still work with galleries too.
How would you describe how that's been working for you? It seems like it's a continual learning process, but are you getting interest and are you getting orders and sales through your digital sources?
Yes. I worked for the last couple of years building up a following on Instagram, and a lot of my followings have come initially from the in-person art shows. Mm-hmm. And then it just continued to grow online as all the internet, social connections, hey, maybe you'll like this kind of stuff, the algorithms, that thing.
Yeah. So when the internet kind of started affecting our business, where people would use the "I got your card, I'll go to your website" line, which we've all battled and gone up and down about. And, a lot of people initially were like, I'm just not going to have a web presence because it undermines my ability to make sales here in person. But I've certainly, through this past year, I have realized there's really no way that we can capture everyone we want to capture. And we have to figure out digitally how those people who do take the card and check out the website, because they don't want to carry the bag. Maybe that is really a thing, that they don't want to carry it through the show and they just rather pay $50 and have you ship it to them. That when they come back, that we actually have a way for them to really see what we do and get connected to what we do. So it builds on that in-person experience.
Yeah, it's a very, I feel, necessary thing now to have an online presence, even though it is a lot to have to manage that as well as the normal workload.
Right.
And I've been very fortunate because my husband, he does graphic design and photography. So he's been able to help me get started with that.
Oh, that's a perfect partnership right there. Wow, that's
it
great.
It's the only reason I married him. No.
Andy is very talented at what he does.
Yes.
So,
and he's a talented artist as well.
Cool. Well, would you say that, your parents' example of their partnership, even though you and Andy have your own separate careers, do you feel like that has influenced how you do your relationships?
I would definitely say that my relationship dynamic is different from what my folks were because they got to be together all day, every day.
Mm-hmm.
And so initially, when I was working as a studio artist, it took a while for him to understand this career path, but he did come around to it and understand, and he's very helpful and occasionally comes to a show with me. Most of the time he stays home because we have dogs.
Mm-hmm. I do. I get where you're coming from there because people who aren't in this business don't understand the idea of the creative process where maybe it does feel like a lot of time goes into something and you can't visually, tangibly see, but then it's like something happens and a switch gets flipped, and then that long idea that took a while to simmer, it then starts firing and things start happening. And it does feel like we live with our business, we live with our art all day, every day. It's always kind of like circling around our brain and all consuming, where people in other careers really do feel like they can just clock out for the day and go on to their other life.
Yes, you completely nailed it. That is exactly how our relationship and kind of household feels.
Mm-hmm.
Because he does work a regular 9-to-5 job.
Yeah.
Well, if I can make a comment, Reiko talking about the future, how the art shows and how she has to, how her business is going to be in the art world. Us starting back in the 80s and what I see now is so much more complicated. It's a lot harder. It's more competitive. I definitely do not envy Reiko's situation these days. I feel like we had it so much easier when we started out.
I envy Reiko's schedule.
Yes.
I mean, man, you are killing it. You are getting into the top shows. You really seem to have it figured out.
Oh my gosh, she has.
But I grew up with a perfect example, though, of learning how to balance business and art and being able to be creative and then also manage all of that. I got to watch the balancing act of both mom and dad's styles. Even though they worked together, they were very different personalities.
But you have to put the work in to get into the top shows, which you have done. Your dad and I, we did not have that. I am so impressed at her 6th year that, almost all A-list shows is our schedule for the year. We've never had that. We had some of the undesirable shows that you didn't want to go do, but, we had to make a living.
Yeah.
Iowa State Fair.
Oh.
Thank you very much.
Comes to mind.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, when it became clear that Reiko was going to kind of follow in your footsteps, how did you feel? Did you try and talk her out of it? Did you support her in that decision?
It was her idea.
It was.
Oh, actually, yeah. When Reiko when she was in college, the Des Moines Art Show had the emerging artists. And, I encouraged her to apply. We had the studio, we had all the material, we had a vehicle and display that she could use. And, she's been making clay items for years. And I just knew that she was able to do this. And so in between, on the weekends, she would come home from Iowa City, create her work. We helped her fire. Of course, she just couldn't do it all. But since we were able to do all that, she was able to do Emerging Artists 2 years in a row at the Des Moines Art Show, and had a great success. So with that and her graduating, she was still quite not decide what she wanted to do. And eventually she did decide to become a full-time
studio artist. Yeah.
Studio artist. And she came to our studio and worked every day, which we loved. We got to see her. And just, watch her own creation. The day that, she had her own line of work, everything was really her own. I think we influenced her in some ways, her skills and just different things, but really from the get-go in the beginning, she had her own creativity and idea. So, I had no doubt that she was not going to make it doing this as an artist. So,
well, growing up in the business, the kids, they're so immersed in it. Things just come to them so naturally because they're so exposed to a variety of different media and creativity.
Yes. I think I'm sure helped her to get where she is. All the exposures, all the museums and galleries, and just talking to other fellow artists, and also other fellow artists over the years gifting my kids their artwork. They were very generous in that way.
Yeah, it's a community. It's a community where people care about each other. Artists care about each other here.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Your lives changed 4 years ago when your father and your husband passed away. Did he get to see you, Reiko, in this business?
Yes. So I went to school initially, in the health and human physiology and sport and exercise nutrition, and, was trying to go that direction. And I really enjoyed it, but there was still always that calling and that itch to continue to be creative. And again, with Mom encouraging the Emerging Artist Show, and getting to have that success on just my own artwork on a larger scale really helped me cement my direction.
Yeah, those emerging artist programs, especially with Des Moines, it's such a big audience. It's such a great promotional start, to turn an emerging artist into, the next step into being a professional. Well, I think it's a great gift that you were able to have your father see kind of the direction you were heading in life. It's devastating to lose him so young. I don't mean to say, but if there is a silver lining in that he got to see you and know where you were going with this.
Yeah. He definitely initially had an opposite response to Mom. I remember him clucking me on the head, kind of jokingly going, "Didn't I knock some sense into you before, what were you thinking?" Even with his response like that, Dad was still nothing but completely supportive and encouraging. And, he was, because of his 10 years of teaching high school art, he just has that natural knack to educating. And so I was able to really learn a lot in a little bit of time. Definitely was cut short by losing him. I wasn't ready for him to be gone.
Right.
But it definitely forced me to learn very, very fast on how to do everything.
Yeah. So, Mickey, when you reflect on Reiko's path here, how do you feel about where she's going? And, I'm sure she makes you extremely proud, but what about what she's working on kind of inspires you?
Well, I'm definitely a big fan. She is like her father. She seems to have endless ideas, endless creativity, not just in clay, but seems like she's a great drawer herself. So, just with everything she has, I just, she's great second generation. And I feel really lucky. We should feel really lucky that we have her,
Yeah. Well, it just sounds like such a great family experience you've all had, and I'm so grateful you've taken the time to open up and share with me about it and with the listeners on the podcast here. So.
Yeah, it sounds kind of cliche, whatever, but if I had to do things over, I guess I wouldn't change anything. It was such a great opportunity of the career, the family, it was hard work, but it was all worth all of it. It was great.
Yeah.
Having Steve in my life all these years, such a big part of why we had this life.
It's so meaningful.
Growing up as a traveling artist kid, I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. It was such a great way to get to experience so much different art, socializing with different artists, and getting to see the country and everything that it has to offer. It just made a very, very desirable career path. And I saw my parents work so incredibly hard, and that still was not a deterrent, because the payoff and the friendships is what makes it worthwhile. And I get to still have fun, and I get to bring my sister along, and we get to have time to hang out together and see the different cities and experience everything that this life has to offer.
Right. It isn't just about what we do. It's about who we are. This business really speaks to living a life of passion, a life of connectedness, and being with other people who have those same values. That's why we endure the challenges. That's why we set up when at least once a year our booth gets blown away or something. You know what I mean? It's just why we will drive for 3 or 4 days in the car and our car breaks down and we still get up and do it again the next week. It speaks to who we are as people.
It's a unique tribe, and it's a privilege to be a part of it.
That's great. It's just so inspiring, and it's just I can relate to you guys on so many levels. This conversation has been such a fun one for me, and I'm so nice to get to know you guys. So thank you so much, and I just look forward to seeing you guys down the road.
Yes.
All right. Well, safe travels, you guys, and thanks for sitting down and talking with me.
You as well.
That's great what you're doing. Appreciate it.
All right.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Douglas, I have such a high opinion of Mickey Cunningham and her daughter Reiko. I loved your talk with them. Thanks for sitting down with them. And thanks for sitting down with him. Had a good time listening.
Oh, thanks. It was my pleasure. Really great time with them. So I had some questions this week from people asking about the podcast, how it came to be, and how exactly we're related to NAIA.
Right.
This idea started from a board meeting.
Yeah.
We're pondering the conversation about how can we increase member engagement. And I thought about it that week, and I thought about a podcast.
You know, Douglas, what I love about the idea of the podcast, when you first came up with it, it started out as an NAIA kind of thing. And it's like, well, why don't we just do this thing separately from those guys, and they can sponsor us? That way, nobody's telling us what to talk about. If I tell somebody to go F themselves, then the NAIA isn't answering emails.
Yeah, and the NAIA doesn't have to worry about Jay McDougall suing them because you brought up his new line of peg leg wooden products.
I know. He's going to have to make me a new knee next. Anyway, yeah, I like it.
And the other part of it is you could only talk about NAIA business for so long and it just becomes uninteresting. So What we decided was what really interested the two of us was this community and the stories of our artist friends and how they got to where they are, what they're doing and where they're going. And that really excited us.
Yeah.
So we wanted to build something that we could interact with our friends and put it out there and then shine a light back on the NAIA, which we're passionate about as board members.
Right. We definitely are. And this is kind of gaining some momentum and some kind of excitement for NAIA. They're not actually giving us any money. We are just doing this podcast, funding it ourselves. We actually got a donation this week. So thank you to our generous benefactor who put a little money in the bank to help us pay for some of the advertising and production costs that go along with the podcast. How did they end up paying us? You set this thing up with Venmo or...
Yes, on Venmo, you go onto your app and you look up at Independent Artist Podcast. You can send us a contribution that way. Or there is a PayPal link connected to all of the episode notes. You click on that link and you can choose the option to send a contribution to at Independent Artist Pod.
Thank you for sending us donations if you're so inclined. If not, just keep enjoying the podcast. And Douglas, we've got an exciting week next week. I've got an interview lined up.
That's
May come
right.
up next week or the week after. In the can, you've already got a couple of killer interviews, one with Chris Dahlquist, another with Cindy Larrick that's coming up. So exciting things that are happening. We're moving quickly. So thanks again.
All right. Well, this was a great week, and looking forward to next week. Hey, Will, take care of yourself.
Thanks, Douglas. I'll see you next week.
Bye, everyone.
This podcast has been brought to you by the National Association of Independent Artists. The website is naiaartists.org.
And while you're at it, check out Will's website at willarmstrongart.com and my website at sigworthglass.com.
And remember to subscribe to this podcast to be notified when we release new episodes.